So, I think we have a quorum. Anything you want to say that we
Yes.
do not? All right, so let's begin the business meeting. We're gonna have a guest speaker, Nancy Morgan. She has been working to get big money out of the election cycle, and I hope you will welcome her for me.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I walked in here and felt very comfortable in Citizens United. What a great message. So anyway, so we're going to talk about money in politics, and I'm going to have to say, next slide. Move down. I always like to start talking about it because here's one of the money in politics. It's basically 80% of this is one of the few issues that there's a complete agreement among both parties. We need to get money out of politics. 80% of Virginians feel that they want 88% want total disclosure. And I always start by John McCain. He's had a great statement, and this is 1999 when he was running for president. Our campaign finance system is nothing less than an elaborate influence peddling scheme in which both parties stay in office by selling the country to the highest bidder. I think that that's probably one of the best statements I've seen. He went on, he lost the election, but he did in 2002, if you remember the McCain-Feingold bill, they passed this campaign finance bill that actually strengthened our system, which has been increasingly eroded by the rulings of the Supreme Court. Next. So let's did it go? No. Okay. I have to... I'm seeing you. That's the problem.
No, it's still there.
Just tell me, John.
Okay.
Nope.
Nope, it's still not there.
No.
No. Okay. Stuck. Yeah. Well, the weird thing is that I'm seeing you. I'm not seeing the. Okay, let me stop the share for a second. But anyway, I can just go. I mean, we're going to be talking. What we're going to talk about is getting money out of politics. Why? As I said, most people agree, and so yeah, it just what is a. Yeah, it's okay. So, how did we get here? Let's talk about that. The need for a constitutional amendment. The Virginia challenge, I think that both Sarah and Forrest can agree there's a huge issue in terms of money in politics in Virginia and action, entry points for action. Next. Basically, we're a nonpartisan group. I came back, I retired from the UN. I'm an economist, and I came back in 2016. I worked on good governance, and I'm looking around going, what is happening to my country? Yeah. And so basically I started volunteering on poverty. I worked on poverty issues with the UN. And then I worked on climate change. And actually John McCain was a big supporter of climate change before Citizens United. And then all of a sudden somebody, an ex-Peace Corps colleague of mine said, hey, what about Virginia? And we all looked sort of terrified because nobody knew anything about Virginia politics. And so we looked, and lo and behold, we are the pay-to-play state. And so I started joining with American Promise, which is unique in the democracy space. It looks at a constitutional amendment overturning Citizens United. And then we started looking at campaign finance reform in Virginia. So next, I think that basically everybody in this room can find an entry point on why they think money in politics is an issue. And here's this, whether you look at Dominion energy policy, clean energy, spiraling drug prices, a dysfunctional healthcare system, broadband access, school boards. I have Moms for Liberty, because who would ever guess in 2021? And it started in Virginia saying that making the whole issue of parental rights, which sounds good. And it's interesting, they always said we're a grassroots organization that gets money from selling t-shirts. Well, lo and behold, actually there are millions of dollars coming from conservative groups. And also I don't have that on there, but data centers, certainly I was just out in Clark County, back at Loudoun County, just walking through, coming back from Leesburg. It's a money in politics is big. And if you look at, I'll just say, in Prince William County, there was a supervisor who got $200,000 from, and we couldn't figure it out because we researched, you get this data and it's like, well, who is this donor? And it turned out to be a wife of the owner, of one of the data center coalitions, and then there was another one. So the thing is, Virginia has no rules, so all this money is coming in to influence the policies that we care about. Next. And I think the issue is, and we'll go over these quickly, everybody knows this, we're losing confidence in our institutions. The Pew Research poll, it started in 1959. Over 70% of Americans believe that government was working for them, and they just did in 2023, beginning of 2024, only 2 out of 10 Americans believe that. And I think, given the current situation, I think that's even lower. Next, and you look at, and democracy is threatened, 72% feel it's threatened. That was a 2003 CBS poll. If you look at if you keep next, you'll see basically 86% of Americans feel that the major cause of the threat to democracy is money and politics. So next slide, we'll just look at, as an economist, I always like to look at graphs. You know, and I think this one is like, it shows it all. What is happening? You see that, you know, especially in 2020, 2022, 2024, obviously the red is the blue is, I think it is the, yeah, congressional, and then the president, but it hit $16 billion. This is from Open Secrets, which is a national organization that basically tracks the money, nonpartisan group. You can, and if you click again, it will, the issue is that the interesting thing is 25% of that $16 billion came from independent expenditures. Let's just go to the next slide. What are independent expenditures? Independent expenditures are money that is not affiliated with a campaign. So if I give Sarah Forrest $1 million, which you can do in Virginia, basically that's a campaign donation. But anything around that is independent expenditure. It's issue ads. You know, if they attack Sarah or Forrest, and at the bottom they say funded by grandmothers, Virginia grandmothers who love rainbows and puppies. That's independent expenditure. So how did we get here? Well, interestingly enough, all roads lead to Richmond. Is that weird? You know, if you were in 1972 in Richmond in a cafe, there was a guy talking to the head of the National Chamber of Commerce, who was also a Virginian. Who was this guy? It was Lewis Powell. Now, maybe you don't remember Lewis Powell, but he basically wrote the Powell Doctrine, which basically had the roadmap for corporations gaining more political power. And lo and behold, in 1974, Nixon appointed him on the Supreme Court. So that wasn't known, that memo wasn't known at the time. But one of the most influential Supreme Court rulings was Buckley versus Vallejo. And it was basically, it's so, campaign finance is not as sexy, and it's very complicated. But you have contributions and you have expenditures, right? And so what Buckley versus Vallejo said, it's the first time that they said money is speech. And so the Supreme Court says, oh, you can't restrict expenditures, but they did respect contributions. So what happens, and I didn't realize this until, you know, probably 3 or 4 years ago, is that ruling means that's why billionaires can run for office and they can spend their own money. For example, Youngkin, when he gives himself a loan, he can spend as much of that money as he wants. There's no limits on it. And then what happened, there was a Supreme Court ruling just 2 years ago, it was a Ted Cruz thing. It says, okay, if you have a loan, you can pay it back after the election, and your donors can give you money to pay that loan back. Anyway, and so then all of a sudden we're stumbling around, and 2010, everybody knows that ruling, you know, it was pretty egregious. Here, roads lead to Virginia because Citizens United was a Virginia company, actually. So basically what Citizens United did was saying, okay, we have contributions and we have expenditures, but you can't limit expenditures. And now all this money, say for example, corporations. If you're running for a federal office, since 1907, Teddy Roosevelt passed the Tillman Act. You cannot give corporate money to candidates. That's good. Yeah. But what Citizens United did, saying, well, yeah, but there's independent expenditures. These guys, it's not a quid pro quo corruption. You know, there's not a direct link to corruption. So what they said is fine. You can just, you know, you can spend as much money as you want as long as it's not donated to a candidate. So then there was a Speech Now thing, which was in the District of Columbia, I think, that basically sort of set up, you can set up organizations that spend that money, hence the super PAC, you know, the creation of super PAC. The interesting one that I like, well, I don't like it, but it's an interesting one, is 2011 ATP versus Bullock. Anybody know Bullock sounds familiar? Bullock was the governor of Montana. Montana had 100 years of campaign finance laws to protect the country against copper industry, lumber industry. So they said, Citizens United came around and they said, hey, we've been doing this for 100 years. So all of a sudden they said, they took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, sorry, Montana. And it's really well documented in the movie Dark Money, the documentary that came out about 5 years ago, is a really great review of that case. And McCutcheon versus the FCC. Anyway, what is the message? Hey, thanks again, the Supreme Court. My free speech is worth more than yours. So let's go. The next slide shows a little bit who gets that money. Okay, keep just clicking. Okay. Anyway, so you have limited spending. You know, you have limits on the federal. You can't give more than 3,300 to a candidate, and the PACs have limits. But then you have this unlimited. So you have super PACs that were created by Speech Now. Donors have to disclose, and they have to disclose to the Federal Election Commission. But in Virginia, the thing is, our board, Department of Elections, doesn't really require them to report, so you really don't know who is spending until the Federal Elections Commission reveals it, and probably after the election. Dark money groups, the Koch brothers, the 501c4s, that's the Virginia grandmothers who love rainbows and puppies. So nobody knows that Nancy Morgan is actually the one that's bringing in. I could take money from Putin and take it and go through that channel, and nobody knows because I don't have to disclose. So the next one, the next three are, let's just 1, 2, 3, click 3 times. Yeah, so there is a language, there's for our freedom amendment that hasn't been introduced yet. American Promise is trying to work right to left, because it's a funny thing. Even if you talk to MAGA people, there's a real appreciation that this is, you know, freedom from money, anything with freedom in it seems to, you know, when they said they had this, that freedom, for our freedom amendment, I said, it sort of sounds like truckers driving around the beltway, but hey, you know, what works. So anyway, but it's so simple. Nothing in this Constitution shall be construed to forbid Congress or the states within their respective jurisdiction from reasonably regulating and limiting contributions and spending. That's the word, spending. So let's go to the next ones. And this what and why we have a ruling. I think, how many people watched the movie Lincoln? Why do we have the 13th Amendment? Anybody remember that? I mean, he was doing all sorts of nasty things to get this amendment passed. It's because it's permanent. And they knew when they, you know, after the Civil War, they bring in the states. If you had a law, it would just be overturned. So that's why we need this amendment. And the next one, go to the next slide. And so let's just look at Virginia. It was like, holy moly. You know, when we looked at it, we have no limit. We're one of 5 states that has no limits on campaign contributions. And until last year, a bill, I could give Forrest or anybody running for office, I could give them $1 million and there were no restrictions on how they could use it. I mean, that is seriously bad. You know, but they did pass this last year after 12 years of introduction. No limits on contributions, 22 states do and the federal government do, and we could do that. There was a bill introduced last year that actually got it out of the Privileges and Elections Committee in the Senate, which is unprecedented, and it was a Danica Rome bill saying, let's ban money from contributions. But it was killed by the Democrats on the floor. Senate. I was like, my hair was, you know, I'm nonpartisan, but I take off. I'm a Minnesota Democrat. So, and no disclosure of dark money and really terrible oversight. There's absolutely no oversight. So let's go to the next one. And there, again, as an economist, I really appreciate this. When you look at 2023, all of a sudden, we spent $190 million on our election. And this has nothing to do with Citizens United. This is just because lack of political will of putting on limits. And if you click again, I took this data and I said, well, let me compare it to other states. I don't know, maybe that's not bad, but it was more expensive than elections in Florida, California, and Texas. So I took it and put it on a per capita basis, and it was, we have the most expensive per capita elections in the country. So, I mean, this is political will and we should do something about it. And next slide. And I took the data and said, okay, well, what does this tell me? So I sort of disaggregated like versus I give $100 to this person or somebody else gives $1 million to this person. I said, if you look at large donations above $10,000, they account for 75% of all Virginian contributions. And 83% contribute less or $500. I can tell you, I don't give a candidate $500. I don't think anybody in this room does, maybe. But yet their contributions account for only 4% of total contributions. So what's the message? Basically, we have lost our voice in our elections, and worse yet, because that implies we've lost our voice in terms of determining what our public policies are. So the next one, and this is really telling this. In 2020, there was the Coalition for Integrity did it's called a SWAMP index, looking at ranking all the states based on their transparency and accountability to citizens. And you can see that we came in 46. I mean, it's only surpassed by Utah, which is one of the states with no limits, Michigan, Arizona, Idaho, and Wyoming. And we just say, hey, there is opportunity to move from the bottom, but you have to have political will. The next one. So last year, actually, every year, I have a friend in our group who was like Eeyore and Winnie the Pooh. No, we're never going to get anything back. And I was like, oh my God, there were 24 bills introduced. Some of them were complementary and introduced in the House and the Senate. Restricting personal use of campaign donations. Yay, we got that passed. It was like, oh my God. I would go down to Richmond and every time I'd say, would you just pass this so we don't have to come back? It's like disclosure of independent expenditures. That was interesting because Barbara Febola a Democrat had introduced this in the Senate. Basically, it forces me as the owner of a LLC called Virginia Grandmothers Who Love Rainbow and Puppies. If I'm going to do an ad that said Barbara Febola kicks puppies, I actually say I have to put my name on that ad. So if Dominion Energy is doing something, they just can't, they can't obscure who is paying for that ad. And then she didn't introduce it, but Senator Stanley, who was a senior senator, Republican senator, introduced it. And ironically, I mean, this is sort of shocking, but the main opponent to that was the ACLU. And it was like, seriously, I'm a donor. And because we have to remember that ACLU during Citizens United was actually filed an amicus brief in favor of it. I mean, to protect their donors or donors in general. Information portal on campaign filings in the Department of Elections. That was Paul Prusik. It all got through the House and almost all the way through the Senate. And then Marcus Simon had a bill that introduced public financing for local elections. So if you're running in a district, basically if the district agrees to have a public financing, you can get a minimum amount of money for that. And I think that's why in New York, they have ranked choice voting and public financing. That's how you get new candidates who can run against incumbents who have huge and very deep pockets. Campaign finance limits. David Bulova introduced a bill 2 years in a row. And seriously, guys, and I'm a Democrat, and I don't want to say this, but they didn't allow that bill to be heard in committee. Now that's bad. I remember when the Republicans were in charge of the House, I mean, it was like we'd wake up at 7 in the morning and we'd testify and it would be 5-3, 5-3, 5-3. It felt like you were getting whiplash. But they voted on it. So anyway, so we had 24 bills. We got one bill passed. Next slide. Next slide. So this year, I mean, I think there are so many issues, you know, you guys know this, we've got the 3 constitutional amendments, Sarah and Forrest can talk about that. A lot of challenges with Medicare, with SNAP and everything like that. But we are hoping to get at least a couple bills, improved public finance information portal, PRESIC. Jennifer Guilfoyle will again introduce her disclosure bill. Campaign finance oversight bill, David Bulova wants to introduce that. And an ethics bill. I don't know if you guys have been following, because there's no enforcement of our ethics rules. And recently, I mean, it's not that I'm picking on people from a certain party, but Sears had 10 trips that she didn't declare on her financial statement of interest. And because the only thing that reveals these is good investigative journalism. And because on our ethics council doesn't even have a complaint process where people can introduce complaints. So anyway, we're hoping for those bills and we've got champions. Also, I'm part of a good governance coalition. We're hoping to get ranked choice voting passed at least in local, if not for primaries, like partisan primaries and for the next. I think for all of us, it's like you go to the vote and there are 8 candidates and the person who wins can win with like 18% of the vote. I think ranked choice voting is a great option. So next one. Plan to restore people's voice in government. What can you do? So let's go and see what we can do. What we can do is we're organizing our 4th Democracy Day in Richmond. We go down there through our Good Governance Coalition, which is the League of Women Voters, all nonpartisan groups who believe in fostering our democratic process. And so we go down there and we have great, you know, there's voice go holding, we got certificates of appreciation, testifying on bills. Next. This is an ask for your group. Start at the local level and ask your city council to issue a resolution on money in politics. We got it passed through Leesburg. We got it passed through Blacksburg. I have the resolution here that I'm going to leave with you guys, because even if I've set up these letter writing campaigns. I can do it for Orange County. So you just put in your address and it will go to all of your the Board of Supervisors, right?
Yes.
Okay, and so maybe they're conservative, but it resonates, that works in some places. But the thing is we need to get your voices raised on this issue. If we don't get some type of common sense reform on campaign finance, we're never really going to be able to get the bills passed that we want in terms of the public wants. I mean, Dominion, let's just be clear. Dominion Energy is the largest donor and they contribute $15 million a year. That's a lot of influence. So we're starting in all of these. I'm happy I'll leave the resolution. I'll set up this letter writing campaign. But even if they don't pass it, it brings attention. The thing is, you need to bring attention to your local jurisdictions. I'm not sure. Next one. And this was exciting. We had 4 17-year-olds who got up in front of the Leesburg City Council quoting the Virginia Declaration of Rights. I was almost in tears. It was like, and they definitely could not say no to that. It was very emotional. Next. And we have a good governance scorecard. We have 10 questions, you know, that basically say, do your candidates support good governance? And I also have these where if you put in the QR code, it will send a letter to your elected representatives in Richmond just saying, we care about campaign finance, put it on your list of priorities. They always say, this is not a priority, Nancy, and we don't hear from our constituents. But it affects every single policy as we've discussed. And I think that's it, but I'm not quite sure. Yes. No, I'll hand these out. So thanks for inviting me. I came down from Alexandria and I'm supposed to go up to Percyville to knock on doors for John McCullough, but maybe I'll stay down here.
Yeah, time to take.
Sure.
Real quick, so a statement and a question. So, to this point, my opponent has accepted the biggest donation he's received since being a delegate. It was $20,000 from Dominion. And to that point, I can't be bought because nobody's giving me money like that. I'm saying right now. So that is a key piece to the way I see government's role in being for the people. Our campaign message has been, we're gonna return in November, we're gonna return government to the people. That's what has to happen. So the question would be, end game, what would be the end game, the perfect environment for this? Would it be public campaign financing, or each side gets a set amount?
Well, I think when you look at comprehensive campaign finance, and it's interesting because I'm a strong proponent of limits. But actually, you look at our Department of Elections or even our Council on Ethics, there's no oversight.
Right.
So when you introduce comprehensive campaign finance reform, maybe the priority is having public dissemination of information and oversight and then disclosure. Because I can tell you, I've had numerous discussions with Scott Sorrell. He opposes limits because he said, Nancy, money is fungible, it will just go through to independent channels. That's true. We can't stop that because of Citizens United, but we can force disclosure to embarrass people. So if we have limits and we have a good disclosure system, it would be very hard for Dominion to take that money and route it through that because Dominion Energy would have to be on the ad and everybody would going, hey, that one's tough. So anyway, I do think, there's a process, but the thing is, I can tell you that our Democratic leadership, and I don't want to name people, but take millions of dollars from Dominion.
Yeah.
And then I say, well, hey, we say, and it's interesting. This is an argument Democrats say, but we need to increase our majority to the super majority. But it never ends. The thing is, at what point, this is where I'm just asking people to level the playing field, because I said, Youngkin has this Spirit of Virginia, a PAC that got its fourth $1 million donation from an out-of-state billionaire. And I asked the legislators, is that right? And they say no. And I said, that's your responsibility, so let's just level the playing field. So
And where the rubber meets the road with that is that 20K is going to influence the way House bill will come up again. It came up this last General Assembly. Dominion has to go to Richmond to raise your rates. They have to get approval. And they're gonna look to do that to pay for these transmission lines that are going to support the data center.
Exactly. It's all intertwined. And I can tell you, I made mention of a board of supervisors in Prince William County who got 200,000. She's not even running this year. From data centers.
And then she gave it to my opponent.
Did she? See, that's the thing. It's, taking.
Not all of it. She gave a big chunk to my opponent.
Yeah. So I mean, people shouldn't be able to get that type of money.
So you mentioned that there's poor oversight from the Department of Elections. Could you speak a little bit and what is that because of the Department of Elections or because their hands are tied?
Well, that's because they have no regulatory oversight. It's like
because they don't have the authority.
They don't have the authority. So all they have to do is, and right now we're trying to, we've had the bills to try to give them regulatory authority. It's like the Council of Ethics. It's like, it's seriously, there are infractions on people filling out their financial statement and they don't check for material accuracy. But unless the journalists come out and say like Winston Sears, it's like, hey, she took 10 trips and she didn't put it on there. And there's really no process, there was this one great Richmond City Council where this guy was running for office. And it was like, all of a sudden he had his financial disclosure. He said he owned a mortuary. And all of a sudden this woman came up and said, hey, our family has owned this for generations. And he worked here for 3 years. And it was brought up by a journalist. And it was like, it's sort of the nobody's minding the storm. And in fact, it was almost embarrassing because nobody knew who should be responsible for litigating that case. But that's an example, both of those, they need to have regulatory oversight.
Yeah, I was told very recently that a political club could not donate more than $200 a year to a statewide candidate.
In Virginia?
In Virginia.
There are no rules on limits. That's
That's what I said.
Who told you that?
I'd rather not like name names, but yeah, okay. So they said their legal counsel told them that. And I'm
No,
like,
no,
I know we have limits in the federal.
yeah,
You know, campaigns, but
no.
state,
It's
like,
not-
There's no limit.
Federal.
Yeah.
there's no limit. Thank you.
Federal is much higher than that. even.
One more question.
Yeah.
Sure.
One question.
Oh,
Okay, Sandra.
I think it's a general attack on journalism as well. So it's even hard for journalists to get that kind of word out. Right now, I'm reading War and Voting.
Yeah.
From Hartman, there's a lot of the same information that you're giving here today is in here, it curls your hair. By the way, that's my t-shirt up there.
is that, yeah,
So all about the money, Jimmy Carter is, as far as I know, is the last president that actually ran on the $2 that you put on your tax return. Yeah.
yeah, do you realize, and this was 2 years ago, because I checked that out through the presidential,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
contribution. They took last year, they took $300 million out of that account because nobody's used it since
Oh,
Bush used it, but not Obama. And they gave it to the Secret Service. That really pisses me off.
Yeah.
That's my money, that's your money and stuff like that. And, yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Look,